Your thoughts on the trend we've seen since the elections, and everyone was pointing to the elections. If we have credible polls, that should be a driver for the market. We haven't quite seen that yet. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing?
Well, in my opinion, what I think is that what happened post-election is there has been some kind of apathy in the market. There's been some lackluster because there have been announcements towards the banking sector that September 30th is the deadline for the conclusion of the recapitalizations. There's no clarity on any one of those stories completely, and so there's been some uncertainty around those banks. What you've seen then is that there's been a flight to safety in other sectors, especially the consumer goods, the brewers. You've seen that sector push the market significantly in the past 2 weeks. And that because the banking sector makes up such a, has such a heavy weight in the market, you've seen that it's dragged the market down significantly. So until there's some kind of clarity around what exactly is going on in the banking sector.
But today, for instance, we saw Nigerian breweries come down about 3%. Do you think that uncertainty in the banking sector is also weighing on the consumer space as well?
No, that's not what I would say. I would say what it is that people have realized that there isn't anything that's coming out of Nigerian breweries for another few months in terms of numbers. Guinness year end isn't until the end of June, so they've overpriced those stocks, as it were, and so you're seeing some significant pullback to probably more fairly valued prices. Those companies are themselves very good, very sound, very well-run companies. So it's not that there's a problem with being invested in them, but currently they're overpriced, and I think that's what's driving the pullback in price right now.
Okay, obviously you mentioned that they've done well. That sector, the breweries have outperformed the market clearly. The consumer companies have also done quite well. The first half has been a good story for those. But looking ahead now, what are your thoughts on what to expect in the second half of the year? Which sectors should outperform? Do you think the consumer and the breweries will continue to lead?
Definitely the consumers are going to be winners this year. The reason is that if you look at the numbers that you have seen from Unilever, from Nigerian breweries, you've still seen top-line growth. That means there's still some kind of demand there, despite the numbers saying that there's no private sector credit, you know, there's inflation, you know, on the rise. What you're seeing is that a lot of the informal non-bank people are still driving demand. A lot of these people are always going to buy beer. People are always going to buy toothpaste. They're going to buy margarine. So they're selling staples that everybody is going to continue to use. So I see that they're going to continue to see significant growth. The Nigerian story is one that we've sold over and over again. Long term, there's potential. So in the next half of the year, you're going to see the consumers do well. Despite the uncertainty around the banking sector, we still believe in First Bank. We still see Zenith, Skybank as significant names that we should be looking at, you know, because those companies are good. But as long as the general business environment continues to be so uncertain, then we're not going to see any kind of significant run-up.
Let's talk a bit about some of those consumer names that you just mentioned. Unilever in particular, it seems like the first quarter numbers surprised to some extent. Very strong numbers. What's the story there?
Well, to start with, Unilever's numbers were very good. What we must also remember is 2010 was quite a trough for them in terms of top line, bottom line. So the numbers you're seeing are coming from quite a low base. The company has finally concluded different administrative restructuring that it's done, and it's seen some significant cost savings on the back of that. Also, you're seeing that there's been some adjustments in world consumer prices, in commodity prices. So in terms of cost, it's not weighing significantly on them. But what we'll see is that it's going to moderate over the rest of the quarter. Still strong numbers, as I said. 2010 was a trough, so by the time you see the year-end numbers, you're going to see some significant growth. Also, we must remember that Q4 is always a festive period, so you're going to always see some kind of push. So Unilever, we expect some good numbers from them.
I would have loved to discuss a little more of the consumers' numbers, but I really want to get your views on risks to consumer spending going forward. Obviously, you've played that story about the Nigerian consumer sector and the big opportunity it presents. But what are the risks? What can go wrong that might shock some of these companies?
Okay, the biggest shock that could come to the Nigerian consumer is the deregulation of the PMS sector. Now, if you see oil prices, petroleum prices deregulated, then that's going to take a beating. The disposable income of consumers is going to take a beating. That is the one thing that I see that's going to drive any type of consumer apathy in terms of demand. But then if you remember that the wholesale and retail trade drives quite a huge part of the GDP, we continue to see import numbers rising. It shows that there is demand, despite what the numbers are telling us. So the Nigerian consumer is still spending, but should there be any type of deregulation of PMS, then he's going to take a beating in terms of disposable income.